Nata Edwards from the Ion College Basketball Podcast joins us to talk more draft and look at the Tradeback options, all today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. Did want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time? Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. There's Doug Branson. You can find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Subtext info also there. There's Nata Edwards. Find him producing the Ion College Basketball Podcast. You can find him on Twitter at Nata the Scribe. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Let's talk some draft, shall we? I know we did. What was the game we played last time? We were looking at, I don't think it was not a chance, not a chance. I think we were just looking at some players to see if they fit or misfit, I believe.
Fit or misfit is not the same as chance, not a chance. How many times do I have to explain this to you?
It's completely different, just like the sicko sound off and the sicko satchel.
Versus the sicko satchel. It's all easy to follow. The sickos have no problem with it. You seem to be the only one that has a problem with it.
It's very different. So let's play another game of not a chance or misfit with some of the trade back options and some of the things that we have going on with Evan Sidery, who, by the way, is now part of the Hornets beat. Welcome, Evan Sidery, to
Welcome to
Hornets
hell.
Twitter. Welcome to hell. Yes. Is it hot yet? He says that there are 3 teams selecting in the top 10 that have indicated they're open for business on potentially trading their draft pick. It could be the Houston Rockets, the Memphis Grizzlies, or also the Utah Jazz, number 3, number 9, or number 10. So with the draft still about a month away, like Nata, how much activity do you expect to see in the top 10 in the first round with the draft that is considered the weakest it's been since 2013?
This is one of the flattest drafts that we've ever kind of seen, or at least we've seen since probably, I want to say, the Cody Zeller draft.
Yeah, 13.
And so we're talking about one of the flattest drafts we've seen, and people are all going to prioritize a whole bunch of different things. So I expected a lot of trades, especially when you consider that the cheapest form of labor that you're going to see, and you have these two luxury tax bans now that are going to play a factor in this, and you're going to see teams that probably need cheap labor to fill out rosters and everything else like that. So I'm expecting a lot of trades, and I'm expecting a whole bunch of just fireworks to go on during that first round.
Doug, do you think the Hornets should be a part of this list?
I think they should certainly be considering all of their options because there aren't. It's not just that there's a little bit of a talent deficiency. There's certainly players, and one of these players that we've all been looking at and saying, well, they've got all of these holes in their game. They're not a guaranteed star. One of them is going to pop off. And so can the Hornets, sink the battleship? Can they lock down on that player? But so much of that is I think you can know some of it, and then some of it is essentially unknowable and really down to a little bit of chance. But a lot of people would look at that and say, yeah, but if you don't take the shot, if you don't make the pick, and the Hornets, they're in a good position. Mm-hmm. They are in, certainly in a better position than a lot of other teams this year to hit on that player. And so, but if you don't take the shot, then you don't have any shot. But at the same time, I just feel like there are so many holes that are not going to be necessarily addressed in this draft or even in the next few drafts that they couldn't address in free agency or trades. And the way you address those in trades is that you accumulate as many assets as possible to give yourself that ammo. And so if they can use this 6th pick to acquire future ammo for that kind of move, I think they would be, better off in the long term. They wouldn't necessarily be better off in terms of short-term player development. They would be taking a step back, especially when you consider, they've lost a year of player development in James Bouknight and Kai Jones' draft, right? And so, at some point they will have to make up for that. But I think they should be considering it for sure.
Well, and let me go to this too, because I see these teams on the list according to Evan Sidery, and you see the Houston Rockets. I think it's fair to say that they're looking to take a jump into playoff contention, having been an impressive team for most of the year. They just miss out on getting to the playoffs. The Grizzlies, a mess with the John Morant situation. They've battled injuries, but the Grizzlies are just trying to get back to where they were. And so they're a team that could take that next step if they get a veteran on their squad. My question is, does this scream scared money to you by just moving out of the number 6 overall pick? Like, look, I don't know what to do. Do we get more center depth? Do we try to take one of these guys as a flyer to see if we can hit on the lotto? Because this is a team, it would make sense to stockpile younger players while having your building blocks in what's hopefully LaMelo and Brandon Miller. Does it scream scared money to you?
No.
Or is it just like, nah, explore the veterans. Let's bring them on board.
I don't blame the Hornets for moving off of this draft if they don't feel like there's the right kind of young guy for this team. It's why, like, despite the fact that I don't think Reed Shepherd's a good fit, I wouldn't blame them if some other team sees Reed Shepherd as this end-all be-all and we got to have him at 6. And the Hornets are like, okay, what are you willing to give us? We need assets. We are an asset-rich, asset-poor, talent-poor team at this point. So I don't look at it as scared money as much as it is. There's kind of already a framework in place. And do you really want to bring somebody in here that you're going to have to do a lot of roster motion with? And let's be honest here, with the way that the Hornets are kind of sending the message that we're not really looking for a center either. Like, I'm not so certain that unless it's the right guy, like they're keeping this pick. Also, one last thing. I'm not sure Memphis is looking to move out. I wouldn't be surprised if they're willing to move up. They might like cling in a little bit more than people are letting on.
Okay. Doug, why were you laughing?
Well, because everybody loves to gamble. And I think that is a factor here. That's why we do this show, by the way.
That's true.
I mean, gambling keeps this show afloat. So everybody likes to bet the buzz. And I think
Thank you to our sponsors at FanDuel, by the way.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. But you've got a new general manager, EVP of basketball operations, whatever you want to call him, Jeff Peterson, and a new front office. And I think there's going to be probably a strong inclination to want to keep this pick, make the first pick, and not trade out this first opportunity to make the Hornets a whole lot better if you really nail this draft pick. I think it being a weaker draft means it's going to be much more difficult to come out a significant winner on a trade because there are going to be less teams that are more inclined to move up. And with 3 other teams trying to move out, well, now all of a sudden you're in competition with all 3 of those teams in order to bring back assets. So I think, and there's one other important factor in all of this. I really think if the Hornets weren't so badly injured last season, if they had won 30 games and LaMelo played 60 games, I'm not going to say he played like 82, but let's say he played 60, and Mark Williams played 30, played 40, okay? And they won 30 games. They missed the playoffs by a significant margin, but they knew what they had in LaMelo, Brandon, Mark. They were sure about it. And they were like, all right, if we just make a few changes around the edges, we can go and get this. A lot like what you mentioned there with Houston. The Hornets are not Houston. They have no idea what they have in this core yet. They can celebrate it all they want. They can say, ooh, LaMelo, Brandon, Mark, that's the future. But they don't know that it's the future yet. And that's why they may make this 6th pick and find out this next season if that truly is the future.
No, I hear you on that. I champion that maybe even more so because it's as valuable a thing you can do for your franchise is hitting on a draft pick, right? Hitting on it changes everything when you hit with the highest upside that you possibly can. And so if that happens in what is considered a weak draft, then it would be great. We'll continue to talk about the draft. We'll move on from the first segment coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
If the Hornets do indeed decide to move back in the NBA draft, then who are some of the trade back options? We have Nata Edwards here to help us dissect all of it. Coming up next, Locked On Hornets. Wanted to tell you that this episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier, and prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. There are plenty of deals too. Priority last-minute deals, flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event, zone deals where you can save more money when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the exact seats. All-in pricing is nice to see. Toggling the feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And you even have seat views offered where you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. More Nata Edwards, more Locked On Hornets ahead. Before we move on to some trade back options, I was looking at the 2013 NBA draft because it's considered the weakest in quite some time. And no, it's not pretty. Going back and searching it, there's not a whole lot of but. There's a little but though. Like when you go back to 2013, which is clearly a weak draft, there were some useful players that were even useful towards the top of the draft.
The Bobcats drafted one of them.
That's right. The Bobcats got Cody Zeller, who I know Doug doesn't like measuring things that happen out of the box score, but Cody Zeller was very good. And if screen assist finds its way into the traditional box score, then Cody Zeller will be there with how much he contributed in that area. But Anthony Bennett, one of the biggest busts all time, whatever. Victor Oladipo, number 2. Like Otto Porter Jr. was a useful player for Washington, got the big contract, and then it was time to move on. But even still, useful for them. Cody Zeller, Alex Len, I think hashtag he's still in the league. Are we there with Alex?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Nerlens Noel, I remember he was a Hornets trade piece for quite some time. Ben McLemore flamed out. KCP, useful player for a while.
About to get paid.
That's right. CJ McCollum is in here. Steven Adams, Kelly Olynyk got traded for a first-round pick. I think that's my point. It's not even that we look at the weak draft class and say, oh my God, it's terrible. Who cares? Okay, but you might get something useful even at the very beginning, even if it is rewarded a bad contract in the Otto Porter case, but you get the idea. Like there are useful players here that you can use at your disposal. Doug, it seems like you might agree or you have some thoughts on 2013.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have some thoughts on 2013 because I'm sorting this list of 2013 draft selections by VORP, value over replacement player, and the 4th best player, according to VORP, is Mason Plumlee.
Hell yeah, man. Still in the league.
Wow.
And now second is Rudy Gobert. I don't know, that just gives me the opportunity to mention that Kendrick Perkins said he was going to give up his individual voting awards, but not because he did not have Brandon Miller in his all rookie selections at all. First team, second team. He thinks there are 10 better rookies than Brandon Miller. Okay. He's going to give it up because he put Rudy Gobert for Defensive Player of the Year. So I say, thank you, Rudy. I appreciate it. Let's get Kendrick off the block.
That's right. I think the point being driven home here is the fact that if you decide to still take somebody at 6, there's still a shot that you could get somebody that could be really helpful despite lacking that star power. Are you in agreement there, Nata?
I think you can get someone that's going to help. I just wonder if you're better served if there's not the guy that you like, but there's another guy that you like in a lesser tier that you know is going to be there. Can you pick up an asset and move?
Yeah,
I think I'm not suggesting trading out of this draft. Let me be very, very clear. I'm thinking trade down to get assets because this is a relatively asset poor team. Even though there are those that think that this team has a better framework than it does, I think this team still needs to get a few more pieces in order to make some more moves down the road.
All right, Doug, Nata brought up trading back. Do you have some trade back options for Nata to discuss while we play Misfit, Nata Chan, Sicko Sound Off?
I mean, the guy that looks sexiest to me right now, but has the big question mark, and that question mark is what I want to ask Nata about, is Kel'el Ware from Indiana. I mean, this is a guy who's almost 7 feet tall, wingspan, almost 7 feet 5-inch wingspan, and he shot, according to the Ringer here, he shot 42.5% from 3. I mean, that's You know, I mean, you're talking about a Miles Turner kind of prospect here, but there have been a lot of questions about his attitude, his effort, his willingness to sort of give it an all for an entire game, give it his all for an entire game. So, Nata, you paid close attention to the college basketball season, his season in Indiana. What say you about, Ware's ability to give it all?
He's the most interesting big to me because there are folks that think he's a better prospect than Alex Sarr. I'm not one of those people that think that, but you're talking about a dude that shot basically around 1.5, 2 threes a game, shot the 40% from three, shot 50, I think it was like 58% from the field. He was one of the better players, and quite honestly, he made that Indiana team very, very watchable. And when we talk about attitude and we want to talk about we got to also remember that Dana Altman and high level guys don't necessarily mix. So that's why he didn't necessarily stay at Oregon. I think he's one of the most interesting guys. And if you're talking about a big that's a little bit different than a Mark Williams type, a Nick Richards type that has the ability to shoot threes, and if you believe that the Charles Lee system is going to eventually need a 3-point shooter from the 5 spot, you could do worse than try and go for Kel'el Ware and work on the talents and trust your development staff that has some legitimate pelts on the wall.
Yeah, if you're looking at him and that Ringer draft guide, Kevin O'Conman, your favorite, Doug, he says there are shades of Miles Turner to his game. Basically, athlete, 7 foot, and shot over 40% from three. You talk about that wingspan as well. A similar body type, 230 pounds coming into the NBA. I think Miles might be a little heavier, but it would finally give us something similar to Miles after being in trade rumors to Charlotte for about 5 years. Maybe that would be the guy. And now if you don't get Klingon, Doug, but you get somebody that actually has evidence of being able to shoot more so than Klingon, where we're doing the Walker Kessler thing, then maybe there is a world where they can both play together. Like I need to dissect his game a little more, but the 3-point shooting, at least there would be enough spacing to maybe suggest that could be something that happens.
It's something the Hornets desperately need. They need a shooting big. If that translates for Ware, they need that. With Klingon, I think you're getting a guy who is like somebody that is a surefire anchor to your defense. But if you believe that Mark Williams is completely over this back stuff, then maybe you're going to value that less in this draft. But you still, Nick Richards is, I hate to say it, makes me sad, makes me really distraught. But Nick Richards is not hiding a shot underneath the bushel. I'm ready to declare that. I thought he was. I thought he was hiding it. He's not. He's not. And honestly, I don't buy that Mark Williams is going to become a shooter. So I'm all in on the Hornets seeking that out. And if they can trade back, now I'm not sure they can even, maybe they could trade. If you're right, if Memphis wants to move up and they maybe swap there, that could be a spot to take Ware. But I think Ware's one of these guys. There's a guy every year that people are like, 15 to 20, and then the night of he goes 11, he goes 10, So I think Ware's that guy.
I completely understand that. And that's the kind of thing I worry about too, where Ware is going to, because he's so athletically gifted, he's going to end up being like the one comp I want to kind of make. He's got so many tools. He's almost Vonleh like. And
God.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly.
What a breadcrumb trail of disaster
that's the name. That's the name. But also, I would also point out that Mike Woodson has had a track record of developing these guys into players that have been better than they've been drafted. And I would show Trace Jackson Davis as the example to that. But Kel'el Ware is so gifted that I do wonder if he's going to end up being a back 10 guy by the time this all is done and he's drafted like 8, 9, 10, or maybe even 7.
I hate you that you mentioned Vonleh, because I'm reading these scouting reports and I'm getting stuff like sloppy decision maker who doesn't handle pressure well, telegraphs passes, could be a good screener but doesn't set screens. And now all of this stuff, I'm running it through the Vonleh lens, and I'm reading, I'm not sure that this guy will know how to play basketball at an NBA level, which is what happened with Vonleh. Vonleh had all the sort of, this guy has all of the physical tools and possibly the skill to be a star, and then they got him into practice and was like, this guy, he can't run a simple pick and roll play. So now you got me scared, and I hate you for it.
But I would also caution you this. Mike Woodson is a much better coach and will prepare guys for the league a lot better than Tom Crean will.
Yeah, I'm just amazed at how we've mentioned so many Indiana big men with now Noah Vonleh, previously mentioned Cody Zeller, and now here we are with Kel'el Ware. Or should we talk about maybe Jeff Newton a little bit later? We're going to roll with him. I think he reminds me a lot of Marco Killingsworth. I think that's who he reminds me the most of. One more segment to go. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Christian Watford, more like it. Sorry, Marco Killingsworth. It's more Christian Watford. We finish up with some trade back options and talk more Indiana centers on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Doug, any more trade back options after spending a segment on Kel'el Ware and whether he makes sense for the Hornets?
I got to go to the expert here, Nata. What are some other trade back options that you think would make sense for Charlotte here?
I know I've said no small guards. Devin Carter's starting to intrigue me if they trade back, because I think he's a guy that defensively was one of the better guards. And if you're talking about a point of attack defender, has the length, but also it allows LaMelo to hide on other guys. Devin Carter's the guy, Big East Player of the Year out of Providence. He's an intriguing guy because I think he also goes top 10, so you would have to trade back specifically in the top 10 for him. But Devin Carter's another one that I'm kind of intrigued by as well.
Well, okay, so if we do the size thing, right, that's why we're a little scared of Reed Shepherd at 6. Yep. It's why Rob Dillingham, who is way small. I mean,
why are all of these shooters so small? It's crazy to me when I look at this draft because, look, the Hornets, they weren't awful at shooting last season, particularly when they made all the trades and they brought in some shooting off the bench. It got a lot better. I think they ended up like 21st in three-point shooting in the league, which, again, is not great, but it's not terrible, and that's without most of the season with your best three-point shooter in LaMelo Ball. And they started to attempt more as the season went on as well. So it's not like they're awful, but they could use a shooter. And then I look at all these shooters, and I'm like, why are they so small?
Yeah, they're all I mean, the top guys, if you just think of the best shooters in this class, so we're going with, Reed Shepherd 6'2", like 6'3" wingspan. Rob Dillingham weighs 160 pounds and shot 45% from three. Jared McCain, 6'2", 6'3" wingspan. And now here we are with Devin Carter, who shot almost 38% from three on over 6.5 attempts per game, but he's 6'2". Now, the wingspan is 6'8", so if you wanted to look at stretching that out a little more, maybe that makes sense. And here's my biggest thing. If you're going to draft somebody small, I think they have to look a lot like Devin Carter on the defensive end if he's known for his point of attack defense. And if that's the case, then all right, that's an experiment that I'm willing to work with more. I think Reed Shepherd is a good team defender. I don't know about point of attack defense that you feel great about, but I do think he's not a turnstile. I think Dalton Knecht is somebody that maybe is lacking a little more defensively, right?
And lacking a lot more defensively.
Right, there you go. So, you're right, Nata. If you're worried about functional size, which there's not a lot of big dudes, especially that can shoot the basketball where the Hornets are picking right now, or even if you're trading back a few spots, Devin Carter makes sense in the shooting and point of attack defensive category. And now you do have length with Brandon Miller and LaMelo that you're working with. I get your point. Doug, are you seeing the vision here with Devin Carter?
I just think, like, if they're going to trade back, then there are options where they could improve defensively easily, more so, surely, than they can with some of these guys that you take at shooting, and you're not sure that you could end up playing them. So that's where, I would be more inclined to either take a flyer on a guy like Ware or, look at a Cody Williams or somebody where you go, look, if nothing else, he can spend 10 minutes chasing around someone and, locking someone up for a few plays.
Yeah, and I guess with Carter, last thing, like the shooting, it's one of those, how real is it? Davion Mitchell comes to mind, by the way, where Carter made 33% of his catch and shoot threes in his first 2 seasons per Synergy, and a lot of this information is on the Ringer draft guide. So it would be tantalizing, but there are so many flaws to be able to find with all of these guys in the draft. You don't have to look very hard to find something, and that's probably true of most drafts, but especially this one.
If they didn't trade, if they didn't trade for Trey Mann, I'd be for this. You know what I'm saying? In a world where Trey Mann wasn't going to be on the roster next season, I would be totally.
Why are we so sure he's going to be on the roster this summer?
I'm just saying, if they think he is going to be, then I don't see them taking him. Maybe Reed Shepherd, just because people are just going to fall in love with the scoring ability. But beyond that, I don't understand taking anyone in that spot.
And we know the shooting is real there. All right, final one. What about Cody Williams? Nata, it doesn't seem like you'd be trading as far back maybe to get in the Kel'el Ware, Devin Carter combo. It feels like maybe if you traded back still within that 10 range, maybe that's when Cody Williams would be somebody that's off the board. What do you think there?
He's an interesting guy because he may be a guy after all these workouts are done and the IQ is talked about. He may be a guy you may have to drive to 6. I think Cody Williams is going to get a lot more buzz. He is a little bit athletically limited, but the wingspan is real. The strength is going to be an issue, but he did a lot of things for a system that really didn't make sense for him. And I think he's going to be better in it. He's one of those guys that didn't play well in college, but is going to be dynamic. And if you are looking for that Jaden McDaniels type of defender, that's your guy. That's the one you go get. And for me, if he's probably below Ware in terms of the rankings, in terms of guys I would love to see them draft if they trade back, because I think he fits this roster like a glove. And more importantly, if we go back to the length and the way that these teams are being built going forward with a lot of wingspan and a lot of skill, he fits this team and eventually could be the starter and or be the Miles Bridges replacement at the 3/4 at some point.
All right. That'll do it for Nata Edwards. We're getting deep into it, guys. This episode, it really felt we are very much.
I got to get my mock draft. I almost forgot my mock draft.
Almost forgot.
And this one is a special mock draft because it is
my
Rod Boone's mock draft 1.0 from the Charlotte Observer, which if memory serves me, I think mock draft 1.0 for Booney came out comically late in the process last year. I feel like 1.0 came out with a week to go before the draft. So this year he's getting the work done early.
He was feeling the pressure of Scoot versus Brandon, man. He wanted to get as much information as possible.
The man wrote a piece saying, yo, they need to trade this pick quite literally a week ago.
That's right. He did say
okay, well, he is making the pick here, and this is it's a mock draft, but really he's just making the number 6 pick. He is not telling us here who he thinks is going to be going 1 through 5, so he just gets right to it. Number 6 pick, the Hornets select Stephon Castle, point guard, shooting guard, ? From Connecticut, and he writes, viewed as a combo guard by scouts, even though he's projecting himself as an NBA point guard, Castle stands 6 feet 6 inches and could be a perfect fit for a team in dire need of backcourt depth behind LaMelo Ball. Now, here's something interesting that Boone writes that I think sort of goes along with a lot of what we've been conversating on here in this episode. Nope, that's not right. Conversing. I like conversating better. I think people.
Beyonce,
I think
if it's good enough for Beyonce, it's good enough for you, right, Doug?
Well, I've been saying that for years, Nata. But I think Webster got this one wrong.
Of uncomfortability, by the way, it was uncomfortability I was experiencing, not discomfort, not conversing, but uncomfortability, conversating.
Well, I come from Gastonia, North Carolina, which is the home of Fred Durst, and he famously had one of those gaffes at an award show. What did he say? Do we remember what Fred Durst said?
I do not remember.
Yeah,
I'll look it up. I'll look it up here in a second. Once you get to conversating on what I'm about to say here, and so Boone writes of the center position in terms of looking at a Donovan Clingan. He says, some mocks suggest Castle's ex-teammate Donovan Clingan could land in Charlotte instead, but that seems unlikely due to the roster's current composition. Mark Williams is entrenched as the starting center, and unless the Hornets are concerned about his long-term health, and there have been no indications that's the case from either side, it doesn't make sense to draft Clingan unless the Hornets plan to move backup center Nick Richards to another team. Clingan isn't a fit because today's NBA game isn't built around 2 7-footers. Spacing just isn't at a premium. Thoughts on that while I look up what Fred Durst said at an award show?
Nata, explain your look to the people.
What is the Minnesota Timberwolves again? 2 7-footers?
One can shoot. Can Clingan shoot like Cat? Well, can Clingan shoot like regular season Cat, or does he shoot like postseason Cat?
That's fair. That's fair, but like, I get where Rod's trying to go with this, but I do believe one of those two, either if it was Mark or if it was Clingan, will be able to shoot. I do think one of them will. It's just, for me, I think the back thing is really being undersold, and I have concerns. I have concerns.
Yeah. If let me ask you this: if you did feel like Mark Williams was totally over this back issue, and we don't know about it, only the team knows just how severe it is, and apparently they're letting on like it's not a big deal. If Mark Williams' back issue, you felt good about not being an issue going into next year, would you draft Donovan Clingan?
Yes, because he'd still be the best player. He's probably still the best player on the board. And then on top of that, it's like, even if the back wasn't an issue, think about how many games, like Mark Williams has played less, like 65 games in 2 seasons? Mm-hmm. And granted, some of that was him spending a month in Greensboro, but still, the center position has been shown to be a weakness. And I like Nick Richards. Nick Richards is easily movable for $5 million. Someone's going to be screaming in the comments, what about James Naji? Naji hasn't shown anything in Barcelona to be where you're not drafting someone in the top 6 if they are the best prospect available.
It's me.
I would still draft him.
I'm shouting. What about James Naji? That's
I kind of figured you would. I kind of figured. But the center position is not near as solid as we'd like to believe, and that's why I just, like, if he's the best prospect there, you still draft him and you figure it out.
Agreeance. Fred Durst said agreeance, and people took him to task, and then he tried to clap back and say, no, agreeance is a word, and he did he said agreeance in an anti-war speech at the Grammy Awards, and people were like, forget the anti-war stuff, agreeance. This guy said agreeance, that's dumb, but he said, no, check Webster's, agreeance is a word.
All right.
And so should be, if it's not, conversating.
Irregardless of that, it's the end of the show, and we need to go ahead and end here. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods. Speaking of pods, Nata produces a good one, the Ion College Basketball Podcast. Go follow him on Twitter at Nata the Scribe. Check out Doug Branson's Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com, and listen to me, Walker Mail, every weekday on WFNZ, 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.
Just looked it up. It's a word.